What's going on, Chris?
Not too much, Phil. How about you?
Doing really well.
How's life in Indianapolis these days?
Oh, it's wonderful. The weather the last few days has been just insanely nice. So, great weather.
What do you like to do? Barbecue, bike ride?
More the barbecue thing. I'm not really a bike rider guy, but yeah, barbecue's awesome. So,
excellent. Are you guys football fans out there?
We are. I'm actually a Bears fan, though. So I've been doing that and getting ready for football season, and it's been great. So, but there's a lot of Colts fans here in Indy, which they beat us in the Super Bowl, which I'm never happy about. So,
exactly, you're in some tough territory.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh man, so Andrew Luck's playing for the Colts.
Yeah, which they're fortunate. They had Andrew Luck and they had Peyton Manning, and they had, they got lucky to have two quarterbacks 2 decades in a row. Really, the Colts and you have Green Bay Packers are the same thing. They went from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. How's that work, right?
Exactly.
Oh, frustrating.
Yeah. So who's in charge throwing for the Bears?
Jay Cutler, which not great. So
yeah, he's been around for too long, maybe.
Yeah, it's time for that to go away, maybe.
Yeah, I agree. Who would you choose, out of this last year's draft? Did you see any talent out there?
Not particularly. There was not. Nobody that really enticed me in terms of a quarterback. So I think we're good with where we were right now.
Well, come on. I'm from Oregon. You didn't get excited about Marcus Mariota?
I'm an Oregon fan, just because they're awesome.
Right.
I had a really good friend that went to Oregon, but I don't know. Mariota, I think he's going to be a great athlete. I don't know if he'll be a great quarterback. We'll see.
Yeah, exactly. The jury's still out. It's hard for the Ducks to transition. Sometimes Joey Harrington didn't make it, but he was pre-Chip Kelly. So,
yep.
A lot of us are hoping that somehow Chip will get a hold of Mariota and we'll start to see the Eagles fly. So
yeah, we'll see. That'd be great, right?
It's just one of those Hollywood scenarios, the what if.
Yeah.
The Eagles fans are pretty fanatic. Oh my gosh, I've run into a few, and they are just diehard.
Yeah, they're pretty nuts. I had a couple of fans at my last, 3 jobs ago, were just diehard Eagle fans for no reason. They weren't from Philadelphia. I don't know. It was awesome.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a mania, I guess. Out there in the cold.
Yeah.
You guys have an indoor or outdoor stadium?
It's both. So they close the roof or open the roof depending on the weather, what they think it's going to be. So
sweet.
Yeah, and there's also a giant sliding window too. So they don't want to open the roof; they just want to open the window. They do that too. So.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like you maybe come from Chicago. Is that?
Yeah, I grew up in the region in Indiana, which is kind of this redheaded stepchild of Indiana. So it's close to Indiana, or it's close to Chicago, 25, 30 minutes outside of Chicago.
Uh-huh.
But it's in Indiana. So you get Indiana taxes and Indiana, all the other things that go with Indiana. And then you're close enough to Chicago that you watch Chicago TV. You're close enough to drive to the city every day. It's just a weird mix of people. So we're nobody wants us in Indiana and nobody wants us in Chicago. So you kind of just deal with that entire life.
Oh man, you're the outcasts.
Yeah, it's good though.
But that's what makes you a great salesman.
Yeah, right. Just have to deal with that my entire life. It's funny when you meet people. You go to college or here in Indianapolis or Indiana, and you meet somebody from the region. It's like this instant bond where you know what you've dealt with your entire life.
Oh man, chip on your shoulder, let's go, people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Well, I'm hoping that Rich Harris is not too far behind because we're supposed to go live in 5. Did you touch base with him recently?
And I sent the email last night and didn't see a response, but I'm sure he'll be here. So he's usually pretty good for it.
Exactly.
He did send a message at 11:22, so he's excited to join and be a part of it. So
Dynamite. Okay. So we're going to sit tight. We've got a couple of folks recording here. My good camera went down, so I've got my bad camera, but at least
it's good though.
Yeah, it's good enough. Listen, what I'd like to do is do short intros. Real brief, just kind of call out your title and who you work with, give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you do at Tinderbox and also a little bit about Tinderbox itself.
Yeah.
And that will happen right after I intro Richard, since he's our featured guest. And so that'll be the handoff, the transition, and then let you run with the questions. I'll watch the audience, engage with them, and then at the end, at like 5 minutes to, well, I guess it's going to be 2 o'clock your time, pass it back to me, and I'll ask you guys about events that you'll either be attending or speaking at. And that'll be a good chance for Richard to promo his upcoming trainings in San Francisco and Seattle.
Great. You can do that for sure.
Cool. Okay. Anything else?
I think that is all. I mean, we'll wait for Richard to get here, but I read through the questions last night. Those are good questions for Richard for sure. So it's going to be a good one.
Did you get the one I sent this morning from Drew Laws?
Yeah, I actually read it. I read it in Slack, and then as soon as I went back and checked my email, I saw that you sent it to us as well. So it's a good one. I actually just by chance, I posted a LinkedIn post today that talks about the 4 traits you hire with an SDR. So
yeah. That actually might be a good one to lead off with, because that is really like square in Richard's wheelhouse.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then the SDR AE handoff, I know he is highly passionate, to say the least, about that. So
perfect. You got your 1-2 punch to get things off to a great start.
Yep. We can go from there and see what questions take us, and we have a few other ones to back up if not, so we'll be good.
All right. I'm just going to give a shout out to Nick LaFond over here. Hey, Nick, thanks for joining us as our AV specialist. Really appreciate you having you on board this morning.
Let's go on, Nick.
Nick is one of the co-founders of the SalesStack Slack team.
Yeah, I've interacted with him a couple times in the Slack group. So Nick's awesome.
Nick's awesome for sure. And we've got a couple folks. Brandon Redlinger hopefully will be showing up.
Yeah.
And he's with Persist IQ. They just had a big raise.
Yep. Yeah, I talked to him. Actually, a lot of these people I've had conversations with, at least probably some of the people we're going to be interacting with, I've talked on the phone with or through the SalesStack group. So it's great to actually kind of go through this with them. So
Exactly. So I am thinking that maybe I should see if I've got Richard on the phone here. Let's see if I can just give him a quick call. I might have his cell. Got 2 minutes to go. Tell us a little bit about what Get Tinderbox is up to these days.
Yeah, so we are had some really great quarters. Really had great growth the last couple of quarters and the last 3 or 4 quarters. But what we do is we build out your sales documents for your sales team, and you help build out a process. So things like presentations, proposals, contracts, any kind of collateral you're using for your sales cycle, we let you build it and build it all in the cloud, and giving insight back into the sales process that you don't have with a PDF or a Word document or a PowerPoint document. So exciting software came on as I was a salesperson in my last job and saw the need, and been scaling it out from there. And it's great. It's an awesome ride so far. So
yeah, you guys are really on fire right now.
Yeah, I feel like we're really catching our stride the last probably 3-4 quarters is really we're really picking up, and we're getting super serious about this right now, which is great. Excellent.
So how can we learn more? Where are you guys going to be presenting? Do you have webinars or you have conferences?
Yeah, so we're going to have a webinar unannounced date yet with Sales Loft sometime late August. Will be Derek Grant and David Kerr. Our COO will be speaking. We're not sure about the topic yet. We're working out details, so that's definitely something to look out for. I'm sure I'll put it in the SalesStack group. I'm going to be talking next week on Sales Hacker on August 11th, 10 o'clock Eastern. It's a panel on using data for your sales development process. And then we'll be at Dreamforce for sure. A lot of our customers are Salesforce users, so we'll be at Dreamforce doing some things, hosting some parties, and that'll be great.
Fantastic, man. You guys are definitely reaching out at all the top levels. Who are you going to be on the panel with Sales Hacker next Tuesday?
That's a great question. Jesse just sent me information on it, so let me check.
Okay. Hey, guess who just showed up?
Hey, Richard.
All right, he is coming on board here.
It is. So the other person is going to be, let me see here, Liz Kane. I don't know where she's from. And then Max, I believe, is the other person. So
Liz is awesome.
Yeah.
Very well-respected woman in sales with what she's done in her career. I've spoken to her several times. She's very, very cool.
Yeah, I'm excited. So
nice.
Well, welcome aboard, Rich. Good to see you here.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. We have a great set of questions to go through, and I'm so happy you were able to curate a little bit in our SalesStack Slack team.
Sure, please. And for everybody who knows, I'll keep that responding to stuff that's posted there. So if something comes up after today, obviously you'll be able to contact me directly, but you can also put stuff there so we can share it with the group. I'm happy to keep that thread alive.
Dynamite. We really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much. We'd like to start just with a short intro and give you a chance to, elaborate a little bit, and then I'll intro Phil, and then let Phil take over the moderation of the questions.
Sure, not a problem. So I've been doing consulting and helping with sales teams, and specifically the lead gen space and sales team space for the last 3 years. I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be a consultant. But as things happen, that's just the way life worked out. And I was very, very fortunate and have really enjoyed it. I think we can all attest to this. Salespeople are know-it-alls, and it's a way for me to be the know-it-all, and most people don't always argue with me, although sometimes they do. But I've been doing sales at every job I've ever had. My first job out of college was working at the Gap, and my mother said, "Why do you want to work there?" And I said, "Because I want to wear jeans and T-shirts every day." So it was really important for me to find something that I was comfortable with. And then over the years, I just continued to grow into inside sales, always did inside sales. I've done outside sales for maybe 1 or 2 years out of my entire career, and I'm just not a road warrior. I just found it to be massively inefficient. It wasn't as much fun for me. I like the camaraderie and the culture of an inside sales team. I like sort of feeling that energy when we're all on the phone, or when someone closes, or when I close. So that's, for me, has been one of the main motivating factors for really focusing on inside sales all of my career. It fit my personality a lot better. I've worked with everything from software before SaaS even existed to hardware, as well as SaaS. I've run call centers with, 70 reps dialing from 6 in the morning to 9 at night, and having, multiple dial machines and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So I've seen a lot and done a lot, and I like to try and share that knowledge with people. I do enjoy, I think I do know a lot. I'm also still willing to learn, and I think that's probably the most important thing when you're in sales, and particularly inside sales, is that you've always got to be learning something. Try and learn one new thing a week, whether it's something new in your pitch or new about sales. Read an article. It doesn't have to be a whole book. You don't have to dedicate your life to predictable revenue or the Challenger sale, but there's a lot of good stuff out there to just help you get better, and really that's what it is, and also find someone else that you can ask questions to. So I think that's really good, and like most salespeople, I talk a lot, so I'll stop now.
We appreciate you having you to help answer some of these complex questions, even just how to frame a hypothesis, a sales hypothesis. Mm-hmm. That's something that Phil and I have talked a little bit about, and I'd like to intro Phil Keene, Manager of Sales Development at Tinderbox. Phil, just give us a brief snapshot of what you're up to at Tinderbox today.
Yeah, so we are trying to eliminate PDFs out of the world of sales, I guess, with everybody else is doing cloud-based software. So what we're doing is we're taking anywhere you use contracts, proposals, presentations, any kind of document you're using inside your sales process, even presentations, taking them online and letting you see what happens to them. So if I send a contract to Richard, I can see he opened it, how long he spent on each page, and what's going on with it, but really any kind of sales document. So it's exciting, and it's necessary work to kind of evolve the technology community and all communities in sales, inside sales, to that next level. So it's awesome. It's been great.
Phil, is it true that you spend some time looking at the middle of the funnel and trying to identify the best ways to accelerate deal flow through the middle of the funnel?
Yeah, and I think that's something that we have expertise at Tinderbox. As we start working at, when something happens, you send out a contract. There's only so many compelling events that happen between an original contact of cold call all the way up to actual signature of contract, and even after they're an existing company as well and in your client list. You have to know what's happening with certain parts of that sales cycle. So knowing that a salesperson that got a document forwarded to legal, they're getting a little more serious, or knowing that the decision maker got into a contract 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and all that data needs to go back to to Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using of choice. So you're able to see insights into what's happening to your documents, your contracts, whatever that is at all times. And it's awesome as a sales rep to have those tools.
Fantastic. Hey, before we dive into questions, I'd just like to alert you guys to the sidebar. We've got a couple of members from the team. Hampus Jacobson is here. Let's see, Nick LaFond is here. These are guys that you've had a chance to interact with. And I know that Hampus actually asked a question. So Hampus, feel free to hit on the fields. That's the lower right-hand corner if you want to send some upvotes. I'm going to give Phil some upvotes here, and also to Richard. And you guys can chat in the sidebar as well if you want to ask questions live from the audience. And Phil, I'm going to let you start with the first question.
Yeah, awesome. So Richard, one that poked my interest and something I know you're very passionate about was hiring SDRs and identifying traits and specific backgrounds for SDRs. So I'll leave it there, but there's secondary questions that probably to follow up there. So
yeah, absolutely. So most people are the first question is, do we hire people without experience or with experience? And the answer is yes. There are some very well-known leaders in the SDR space who don't like to hire someone who has been an SDR before because they feel like, well, why didn't they make it into the sales realm? I think that's a really smart approach. But there's also something to be said for if you're at a super early stage startup, if you can find an SDR who is willing to sort of go from a big org that's scaled to a small org because they want to build it themselves and they have management aspirations, then I don't think SDR experience is a bad thing. But I do like the fact that if hiring someone with no bad habits is really helpful. There's not a lot of well, shouldn't we do it that way questions. You end up getting, okay, but that doesn't make sense to me, so explain it more. And then by default, your process gets better or your teachings get better.
Right. Yeah, that's awesome. And to kind of clarify too, is one thing I'm big passionate on is doesn't matter, your answer is yes, no matter what, is hired on personality traits, hired on what they're really good at and what you're looking for specifically. Mm-hmm. Hiring somebody that's analytical, hiring somebody that's able to check their ego. So I guess kind of go into what kind of questions are you asking to identify some of those traits that you're looking for?
Yeah, so some of my favorite questions are to ask them, I'm actually going to go see if I can find a couple of them real quick, but I will ask them about how they've ever convinced someone of something to change their mind, right? Yeah. Because an SDR's job is to convince someone, particularly outbound, to take a meeting. Yeah. And instinctively, whenever you cold call anybody for anything, it's just like when you go into Nordstrom's or Macy's, someone comes up and says, can I help you? And you go, no, thanks, I'm just looking. Well, That's exactly what you get when someone answers the phone. So I asked them, tell me about a time you've had to convince someone you really respect to change your mind. Very specifically, I would try and default to a teacher, a good friend, sometimes a parent, but I think we're all really too good at manipulating our own parents, particularly if you're in sales. So sometimes that counts. But it depends. It might be, how did you convince your parents to let you go to spring break? How did you convince your parents to let you go away to college, that you were responsible enough to do something? That's what I'm really looking for, right? Where it was something they really cared about passionately and deeply, because that's the other key piece, is they got to care about the product. We all know that, right? You can't sell something you don't like or love. So having them show me where they've convinced someone about something they love is a really good thing.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've heard a few other people, specifically like SalesLoft, they talk about. You have to just love what you're doing. You have to love sales development. You have to love sales. If you want to sell sales software to salespeople, you better just be all in and be all in all the time. So that's really interesting to hear that and talk about that. So
and I can tell you, I've been in sales jobs where I didn't like what I was selling. Yeah, and it's there. You can't ignore it. Yeah, it comes through, and other people can see it too. So
yeah. So is there anything else that you could think of, just tips or tricks of, I'm a small startup, I'm hiring my first SDR. What's the first thing? What's the first thing as a hiring manager I do?
Well, I think the first thing is you always try and hire two. I always like to hire in pairs, because I think that you don't want to suicide yourself into one person in case it doesn't work out. And two, I think people learn better in pairs. They have some camaraderie. You can actually start some culture there. And a lot of people say, well, I can't afford to. Well, you can if you realize that within 90 days, one of them's probably not going to work out.
Right.
So you're not hiring two for a year. And if for some reason in 90 days you decide that you're going to keep both of them, well, then you should have enough leading indicators that you can afford it.
Right. So that's a good question. So leading into one of the other questions that someone asked you was from Bart. He asked, how do you create an equitable commission schedule for your new sales team? So maybe walk me through that a little bit.
Yeah. So, you've got to take all these things into account. You've got to take in, ACV. I also remind people to look at the LTV of your customer. Someone I think posted something. Well, what happens if our MRR is only $100 a month?
Right.
It's $1,200 a year. Well, that's true. But if you know that your lifetime value is 3 years, then you can look at that into some of your compensation structure, right? And knowing that you're going to build you might be paying them more in the first year, but you're going to get more in the second and third year because maybe they get a smaller commission on renewals or something like that. So you need to take in those pieces. Fair and equitable. Is it fair and equitable across the sales team, or is it fair and equitable across marketing and engineering? Those are two different questions.
Right.
I see this a lot with early stage companies and a lot with early stage companies or companies that are typically headed by someone who has never done sales or carried a bag, and they really want everybody to feel equal in the organization. And I absolutely think that's great. But salespeople are wired differently. We are. There is a reason we deal with sales. If an engineer wants to get on the phone and hear people yell at them and say no 100 times a day, I think they might change their mind. But that being said, there are other ways. Every department needs to be taken care of. It doesn't mean sales, gets it all and gets all the fun trips and all the other fun stuff. But every department needs to be taken care of. And it's up to, the leaders of the organization to determine how to make that work. But if you think you're going to have a flat sales structure or a flat salary structure and not pay salespeople commissions, you can try and build a big culture with that. Zappos has done something a little bit like that. But at some point, some of your best salespeople are going to want to make more money. That's just how we're wired. And they will go take it somewhere else if you're not going to give it to them.
Yeah. So. And I've actually seen people doing kind of the opposite of that, of making sure everybody in the company has some kind of variable comp and saying, you have stake in the game. We have to be successful for you to get paid the extra.
Particularly because everything is so much more metrics driven, right? Like it used to be, 25 years ago that, marketing was Yellow Pages ads and newspaper ads and radio ads, and you couldn't measure that for anything, right? You didn't know how to measure that. And now marketing has some numbers they got to hit, right? And that's wonderful. And I think that when there's a product release that comes out, that typically generates more interest from marketing. So engineering's got, great skin in the game too, because without a great product, nobody's doing anything. So you're absolutely right, Phil, that everybody deserves some level of variable comp, whether it's through bonuses or commissions or equity plays or equity bonuses, something. Everybody should be taken care of.
Yeah, everybody definitely has to have some kind of skin in the game for sure. So we've had a couple of questions. So walking through that, I kind of think it's a natural transition of, all right, so I'm an SDR. What's the day in my life look like? Is it calls? Is it emails? What's first? And what's a cadence look like? I think Ben asked the question, how do I get demos without having to use cold calls? So what's the right approach there?
Well, my first question would be to ask Ben, and I don't know if he's on the line or can type it in on the side, is why don't you want to make cold calls? Because there's, unless, and I think I put this in the feed, was unless you have a self-serve model, which does exist and can work, every sales deal has a conversation. That conversation, for lack of a better word, happens on a phone or, on a Skype, but there's a voice-to-voice communication. So I think some people who have not done sales, just haven't had that experience with it. And Ben, I apologize if you have, and you're just wired differently than me, and that's totally fine. So I don't want to be disrespectful to Ben's point of view or his question. But it's going to happen, right? Back to your original question, Phil. Everybody needs to have a model day, right? And that model day should be spent around proactive and reactive activities. Proactive activities are those that are going to move the needle. right? Whether that's more appointments being set if you're an SDR, whether that's number of proposals, I'm sorry, not proposals, but number of sales calls you're going to make that day. Whatever it is, it's got to be proactive. Reactive is anything else, right?
Yeah.
So, here's a perfect example. You send out some emails to, some Toyota, right?
Right.
And all of a sudden you come in and it's 8 o'clock in the morning or 7:30 in the morning in California because we all get up early. And there's this email in your inbox for someone saying, hey, can we talk this morning? Right? The natural thing for every salesperson to do, including me, is to respond to that email immediately. I got to talk to them. They want to talk to me. I want to talk to them.
Right.
So I want to promise you and assure you that person is not sitting by the phone waiting for you to call them that moment you walk in the door,
right,
as much as we like to think that they are. So I try to remind people that early morning is the best time to get in front of people. So make sure you do 10 new touches that morning from your cadence, whether they're emails or voicemails or live calls, right? Make sure you do something before you start going through your email, because you will go into your email box and then the next thing you'll know, it's 9:30 or 9:45, and all you've done is shuffle stuff around in your email box, right? Yeah. And maybe responded to somebody. And we all know that between 7:30 and 9 a.m. local time, wherever you're calling, that's the best time to get someone at their desk, right?
Yeah.
We know that. The statistics show it. So you absolutely make that 100% proactive outbound outreach, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's one thing.
I'm sorry. That email can wait. They're not going to go away because you didn't respond for another hour and a half.
Yeah. To the point of that is, so I teach my SDRs as we walk through it, is if you make a phone call, send an email, and do all of those things, it takes you 5 to 7 minutes to send that email, that call, and all of the login in Salesforce and all the other things you have to do. That takes a lot of time. Versus if I just make 10 phone calls, I can make 10 phone calls in 15 minutes.
Usually. Yep.
Yeah. So I think it's that approach. And if you have a dialer, it's even more than that.
Yep.
So with technology in place, you should be able to work smarter, but also have some kind of time management in place. I think that's one of the hardest things to teach as a manager is somebody, I just came out of college, I don't know how to manage my time properly, or I'm an SDR with really bad habits and I've been hired from another company. I just called all day and made emails and did that. But there has to be a process to your day of,
yep,
you start here, you do the next thing, you do the next thing. There's then, like you're saying, proactive and reactive things that happen there.
Much like there's a cadence to your outreach and to people, there's a cadence to your day. And you need to figure out the right one that's for you. Yeah.
I'm curious about that. So go ahead.
Can I jump in with some questions from the audience?
Yeah.
Sure.
So Hampus Jacobson queried in our team about a distributed sales team. And Richard, I think you suggested there was more value in concentrating the small startup sales team in-house.
Yep.
And so Hampus has asked how to reach out across multiple time zones. He's in Sweden selling into the United States effectively so that he can have that local conversation even though he's 9 hours ahead of the West Coast.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things. So I think you should try to dedicate one day a week to, U.S. time zones. And that's tough, right? That's hard on the body and the mind. I get it. So I won't say that's definitely easier said than done. Given the limitation you have with time zones, the other thing to do is to you're probably going to have to do a lot more email prospecting. You're going to have to do more stuff in email. And you can, if you're using SalesLoft Cadence or Tout or something, Yesware, you can schedule emails to go at appropriate times and appropriate days in the United States. And you're going to want to need, that sounds horrible. You're going to want to really focus on that personalization of that email to get a greater response. You're not going to want to send out 100 emails that sound all exactly the same. So this is something I tell people to do, and it doesn't matter what time zone you're in, is, we all know that Thursdays and Sundays are great days to send emails to get them opened and read. Again, we followed the statistics.
Yeah.
I always ask people to make sure they tee up 2 emails every day for Thursday and for Sunday, so that by the end of the week, you've got 10 or so going out on Thursday and 10 going on Sunday. And that way you're not feeling burdened or rushed come Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday night. I'm going to spend the next 4 hours writing emails. It's terrible. It's just the worst thing. Yeah. And again, establish a rhythm, right? Establish a cadence. You put reminders, block off. This is the single best thing you can do, is block off time in your calendar. I literally have on my calendar at 9 a.m. I need to do social media. That means I need to put something on LinkedIn, Twitter, Blab, whatever. I don't hit it every day, but it's there so that when I haven't scheduled something, I try not to schedule meetings around it or appointments. I mean, if I'm on site with a client, that's different, but put it in your calendar so that you can start to build your cadence.
And can I get your thoughts on this concept of influencer marketing? I met with Brian Kramer with Pure Matter earlier this week. He was at Little Bird. What are your thoughts on cultivating relationships with key influencers in certain social media circles?
So I see social media a little bit differently right now, and but I think it's good, right? So first and foremost, connect with anybody and everybody, right? Always. But there's things that I see people doing. So one, you should absolutely connect with other thought leaders, but then you should also participate in conversations to become a thought leader and be seen as a thought leader. So, and I'll give you a perfect example of how I do it every day. I didn't know Max at Sales Hacker until January of this year. Never knew him. I'd heard about him, seen the book, that kind of stuff. Met him. Then I joined the Sales Hacker group on LinkedIn. And the one thing I know about anything on LinkedIn is nobody wants to be sold. You can't go sell your product, right? So, and I'm a consultant, so technically everybody there is somebody I could sell. My goal has been to do one thing and one thing only, which is to add value. I will comment on things to add value. I will connect with people. Hey, I liked your comment. I thought we should connect. Let me know if I can ever be of help, right? I'm not asking them for anything. I'm not trying to sell them anything. I'm not trying to set an appointment. I'm just trying to add value and establish, my brand, right? As a person, aside from the company. So social selling absolutely matters. Doing it with influencers is really, really smart too. There's absolutely nothing wrong with thumb-upping Aaron Ross, right? I know I've gotten to know Aaron over the last couple of years, but when he sends his email out, and if you haven't read it, I always respond and say, "Hey, Aaron, thanks for the email, really nice." And he'll always respond back to me, "Hey, thanks, Richard. I'm glad you liked it." So again, nobody's going to remember us forever, right? It's not like, oh my God, Tom Brady just favorited my tweet. Oh, now Tom Brady knows me, right? No, he doesn't. But there's value there.
I love your answer, and I think it's really helpful for Hampus, who's working out of Stockholm, Sweden, because he can engage with thought leaders irrespective of the time difference.
Right.
And with that, I'm going to send it back to Phil and let you keep moderating the questions.
Yeah, there's one more thing I want to just add on sort of this whole social selling piece. When people connect with you on LinkedIn, the first thing is I try when I connect not to send the standard LinkedIn connection. I hope people know that. Don't send, "Hey, I'd like to add you to my network." You can say, "Hey, I saw your comment. I'd love to connect with you," and that's it, right? That's the first thing. The other thing that I think is really important, when someone asks me to connect or you connect with me, every single person who ever connects with me gets an email back from me that says, "Hey, thanks for connecting with me. If you ever need anything, here's my direct email address and phone number. Ask me," and I say, "Ask me anything if I can ever be of help." Yeah. Because I feel like there's a piece missing that's so important and so vital when you talk about being social. We've been conditioned that social is about expressing outward what you want people to see to you and not to respond to them so much. And I think that response piece, particularly in a business setting, is way more effective than in an Instagram setting. So,
yeah. That's actually a great lead-in for the next question. So I can attest that's exactly what Richard does because it's happened. That's how we started talking. Rear Stout got connected to LinkedIn. He sent a message to me. He said, "Hey, ask me anything you want." And actually the next topic is what we spoke about because we're real passionate about it, which is the SDR to the AE handoff. What's that SLA look like? And how do you control it, right? How do you make sure there's no tension between the sales executives and the SDR team?
So if there's a tension between the sales executives and the SDR team, it's usually the sales executive's fault.
Always,
right? It's never the SDR. It's really important that you have great communications. Part of the challenge is when you have one SDR managing 5 AEs, which is also not a best practice. That's a challenge. So everybody needs to recognize that. I personally believe that the best solution on an SLA is a one-to-one relationship where the AE actually mentors the SDR. I think if an SDR sets the appointment, the SDR should actually be on the first phone call with the AE. I also think the SDR should do the introductions of the phone call. Say, Bob meet Phil, Phil meet Bob.
Yeah.
And then the SDR sits back and listens. And that's great training for everybody, right? And it lets the AE come in with a certain level of knowledge and because AEs, I don't think, and if there's someone on the line who want to disagree with me, I don't think they want to deal with that. They want to get straight to the chase of let's talk turkey, right? Let's get to that. So let the SDR learn how to do those kinds of things. The other thing that I think is very important in the SLA is the SDR sets the meeting, and the SDR sends a calendar invite to the AE and to the client. I also think the SDR and separately should send an email to the prospect and the AE, with Bob meet Phil in the subject line, and it says, hey, you guys are scheduled to talk on such and such a day. Here's everybody's contact information. Here's the agenda. Maybe if you guys set up an agenda as part of the SLA, I'll leave it to the two of you from here. And that way, the AE and then the AE's part of their SLA should be to respond back to the SDR and saying, hey, thanks for setting the appointment. Thanks for sending this introduction. Bob, I really look forward to talking to you. If you've got any questions before we chat, let me know. I'll try to get them answered as quickly as possible. Right. So start the sales call before the sales call starts. Right. And I can assure you, your competitors are not doing this. And it will come down to those moments when you're at the final throes of a competitive deal that they're going to choose you not just because of what you do as an organization or what your tool or your product or your software does, but also how you do it. And that's really, really one of the most important things. So,
yeah, to kind of piggyback on that too, and I know you and I feel similarly on this. Is it an email handoff or is it a phone handoff? And I err on the side of saying it's a phone handoff. Mm-hmm. There should be that relationship that happens and transfers over. And maybe it's not right for everything, but I definitely feel pretty strongly it should be a phone handoff, and there's a knowledge transfer that happens there.
Yeah, there's actually I wrote a blog for Vorsight VP. You can find a link to it from my site onto theirs, but very specifically about these steps of a perfect handoff. And for me, I think it's the email and the phone call. Right? Like, let this prospect know that there's a team and a big organization behind this tool that you're servicing them with, right? Now, in some cases, this may not work. Maybe it's a small MRR or people get busy. I get it. But, there's no reason you can't, work towards a best practice on that, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess what's that first call look like? So I think that's one thing we've always talked about here is, do you go straight to a demonstration, or is it just purely discovery where you talk to them?
Fuck no. Sorry. Don't mean to offend everybody, but God, a demonstration is not a sales call. I just went through this yesterday. There used to be this time in the world where we didn't have, PowerPoints to do a demo, and we actually had to have conversations to sell to people. My best way to describe that is, imagine if you got on a phone call with somebody and all of a sudden the computer went down. What would you do? Most people would freak out and try and reschedule the call.
Yep.
For me, it means I want to paint that picture in their head, right?
Yeah.
I can imagine. I'm married, but I certainly before I got married, I was like, oh my God, I'm going to walk into the store. I'm going to buy this ring. I'm going to pull out I painted the picture of how this was going to go down because it was, not something you do every day, right? So paint the picture. Be willing to paint the picture. Here's the other thing that I don't do. Most people say demo, and what they really mean is a PowerPoint with some pictures of how the product works. That's not a demo. Right. So you got sorry, Nick, I'm sorry to hear about your car. That's very funny. That is not how you do it. I actually send, and if any of my clients are on the line, I actually send my deck of what I do and how I do it before I ever talk to a prospect, because I don't want to walk through my deck. Your prospect doesn't want you to walk through a deck. They really don't. They have no desire to do that. They can read that deck in 90 seconds, yet we take 30 minutes to read what's on the screen. Yeah. Right? It's terrible. It's again, another post I wrote about that on, people using their sales deck the wrong way. And particularly now, there was a part of this question, Phil, I want to go back and address. Do you go straight into the demo on the first call? That really depends on what you're trying to accomplish, how far your SDRs have qualified it. I would think that at Tinderbox, your SDRs are fairly sophisticated. They actually have probably qualified some level of BANT or ANUM, whichever one you're using. So it might be appropriate to go straight into the demo, right? I get it. But most cases, I don't think you go straight in the demo. You want the AE to ask more questions or to at least say, hey, gosh, I hear this is what your challenges are. I want to make sure we talk about that stuff.
Yeah, and I think to that point, too, is we've seen it, because we do potentially sometimes go straight to a demo, but most times we go to that discovery call, which is the appropriate way to do it. But I think it matters on ACV. So if you sell a $150 ACV, typically that buyer is going to be just the owner, the proprietor. It's just him by himself. So sometimes you have to make it quick. They're transactional. They want instant gratification there. Versus if you're selling to a global company, there's a lot more steps in there that you have to learn about and how they're going to buy and what their process looks like. So you have to slow it down and do a discovery there.
So here's the best way I describe it is that your demo is not a crutch. It's a tool.
Yep.
It's a tool to fine tune your sales process. It's not a crutch because you don't know what else to say or you're afraid to ask questions.
Yeah.
So
it's great. So going to the next question. Is there anything else from the audience that you saw, Chris, before we go to the next question?
Well, Nick LaFond mentioned Demo Chimp, which he and I took a demo of, and we found that to be a very interesting enterprise-level tool for presenting different views for different levels within the organization.
Yep. I'm
just curious if you see other solutions out there that are trying to curate, if you will, the value proposition depending on who you talk to.
So I ran into Demo Chimp at Sales 2.0 this year and introduced them to one of my clients, Top Ops, and agreed. I was like, oh, this is a fantastic tool. I don't see that a lot. I just haven't seen it a lot, right? Like I personally use DocSend a lot to send out my presentation. It's just what I've gotten used to using, and now it's a habit, and I'm sure there's probably something better, and I just, I've got it all set up, so that's what I use. So, we get lazy that way, right? So I haven't seen anything like that. So I'll stop there because I don't want to guess.
Yeah. Great. So moving on to the next question. So Anton asked a question. He was looking for a sales approach for specifically 1,000 ACV with a mobile construction product, but maybe we'll expand a little bit. Just kind of a niche market approach with a smaller ACV. What's that look like?
Well, you still have to discover, right? I mean, believe me, I've got 2 kids and a 5-year-old, and I have 2 boys that are 5-year-olds. And if I'm the person who this week has to go and buy a little girl, one of their friends, a birthday present, Lord knows I'm going to the toy store and I'm saying, help me, right? I don't know what 5 and 6-year-old little girls like to play with. I mean, I can assume it's Barbie. I can assume it's certain things, but I don't always know. So just because the price point feels low doesn't mean you shouldn't do discovery.
Right.
That don't be tricked into creating a belief system that, oh, it's a low price point, we shouldn't talk about what their pains are.
Right.
What I do think can happen, though, is you can come in as a knowledgeable expert and say things like, hey, before we jump right into it, most of the time, Chris, when I talk to people in your space, they say they have one of these 3 challenges. Which one of those are you facing? So you can at least make it easier for them, because there's nothing worse this is the worst question for a salesperson or an SDR to ask. What keeps you up at night? That's the worst thing to ask. So give them 3 options to choose from. Make it easy for them to tell you what their pains are, right? I got a lot of things that keep me up at night, and I don't really think you want to go through the whole list. So,
Richard, can I reflect on that? A lot of times the prospect wants to know the ROI. but that can be very hard to quantify. What do you recommend for product developers who want to qualify the ROI but have a hard time putting it into real hard numbers?
Yeah, so that's actually an opportunity cost question, in my opinion, right? So when they say, I want to know the ROI on this tool, and most of us freak out. We'll go, oh my God, how do I do an ROI, right? Well, that's not what you should be doing. It's like, well, let's talk about that for a second. Why are we even looking at this tool? What is this tool going to accomplish for you? What will it make you more efficient at? What will it increase? And there are two pieces to that ROI. One is what's going to increase, meaning are you going to get more leads? Are you going to get more customers, right? But if the process is more efficient, how much money are you going to save over there? So the ROI is never a straight ROI, and that's what everybody likes to tie it to. And they freak out when they hear that question, and the buyer knows this. The buyer knows that if you freak out on the ROI, you're going to have a hard time holding price when you get to the pricing discussion. So it's a chess game right there, right? So, sacrifice the pawn and, go for the queen and say, well, hold on a second. Yeah, let's talk about ROI. Why are we even having this discussion? Why is that problem so important? Who else is impacted by that problem? How's it going to...
Great opportunity to identify additional decision makers who would be impacted by a beneficial change in the workflow.
Absolutely. If ROI is a objection that you get a lot, and and there are just some products that are that way, particularly maybe a smaller price product or something like that, or even big price products. Take the objection away by making it part of the agenda. Say, hey, at some point I know you're going to ask me about the ROI. When we talk about it, we're going to talk about what that really means for you so that I understand what you're trying to accomplish, and two, what opportunity costs we're going to create efficiencies around.
Exactly.
And now all of a sudden, it's no longer an objection. It's just part of the discussion, right? And you've totally taking control away from them on it, and you're the expert. But make sure you got your data. Make sure you know how to answer that question.
Love it. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely want that trusted advisor approach of going into it and making sure you're solving actual problems that help the organization, which is great. So, great. I didn't see any other questions in the sidebar. Did you see anything else, Chris?
Not so far. No, we've got about a dozen people in the audience right now, but they're mostly listening, and so you guys are doing a great job.
Great.
I guess my question would be, I'd love to know, just by I don't know, is there anybody here who is with they haven't had or they're about to just start building their SDR team or their sales team versus someone who's here where they've got 15 or 20 reps, or maybe you're like Phil or Chris or anything, where you've got a bigger team, and what challenges you're having. I can go back to some questions and answer some questions about hiring if people want that. But again, I'd like to maybe give them some ideas to ask questions.
Well, Hampus Jacobson is here, and he's listening, and he's starting a small sales team in Stockholm, Sweden. So he would characterize that startup and his challenges that he's offshore.
Right. So, and I know we talked about this, and I think if I remember correctly from the Slack, it was also that people are remote, so everybody's working from home. And so there was a little bit of a, how do you build that piece? That's actually, I think, in some ways, a very cool thing, right? That's part of what I call your war story. That's going to help you build your warrior spirit of your organization so that in 2 years or 6 months or 18 months, you're going to be able to look back and say, gosh, remember when we all worked from home and we all had to go meet at the coffee shop and that's where we had our meetings or we all did stuff. So there are advantages to that. And I think that people are excited about joining an org like that. And then just that moment when you go from that to having your first little office, and may not be the top of the Empire State Building, but it's going to feel that way. And I think those are great places to be. So
let me characterize. Can you look in the sidebar and see Hampus's comments?
Yeah, I do. 2 reps have joined Huge customers. I know some folks over at both Evernote and Hootsuite, but need to do that in reps with passion, right? Make sure you can name drop those guys left and right. People are not remote yet, but it's a thought to handle time zone differences. Yeah, that's normal, right? Like that, even that happens in the States.
Yeah.
So I've seen it where we have on an SDR side, because we're in most of the teams I work with that are in California or anywhere really, the SDR actually moves their day to match the time they're calling into if it's a geography-based territory.
Yeah.
So, and in California, there are lots of people out here who love to get up and be in the office by 6 a.m. so they can leave at 3 p.m. They've learned to wire themselves on an East Coast time schedule. And I know there are people on the East Coast who are like, I don't want to show up till 10 in the morning, which is 7 o'clock California time, and they get to have that lifestyle. So I know that I think my best advice is to try and build the person around the time zone they're calling into.
Yeah, and we've done that here at Tinderbox. So we have a few reps, or a few of our SDRs are actually West Coast reps. And we've seen a tremendous lift in our business on the West Coast by just targeting them on the times that we can talk to them. Mm-hmm. And it even goes as far as how we interact and who we talk to. And you're interacting with them on LinkedIn, on SalesStack group, you're on SalesStack, you're doing certain things with the West Coast people that you typically don't do, because when they're online when you're online on your set hours of, if it's 10 to 7, it's 10 to 7. Even things like tweeting at certain times, tweeting at 3 o'clock in the morning off of Hootsuite. Mm-hmm. Well, you're starting to interact with that group that's the late night owls in the West Coast. So it's just a different way to reach into them. Yeah. And that approach has helped us tremendously in terms of getting into the West Coast and starting to work with customers out there. So,
Yep. I'm seeing something come up on the side. I was recently building an SDR team, moved from straight account manager approach to SDR. Got a lot of pushback from managers because it wasn't any improvement. The system is working. Went from a straight account manager approach to SDR AE. If you can describe that a little bit more, what does straight account manager mean? Meaning that the AE managed their own stuff and didn't have any SDRs? Is that if that's the question, I have an answer, but I want to make sure I understand it. They were handling the leads from trials to close. The AE was, right? Yeah. Okay. So I think here's what, and this is a big problem that I see too, is that AEs are not good at prospecting, right? They shouldn't be good at prospecting. That's not what they're paid to do. They're paid to be closers. But specialization has occurred to the tune, and because of the amount of information we have, we can try and work smarter and not harder. So the goal is that you hire more SDRs than AEs. So I actually was talking to someone a few weeks ago, and they told me they had 3 SDRs and 10 AEs. And, each SDR had 3 or 4 people that they were working towards. And I asked them how many of if they could fire the AEs tomorrow, if they could fire 3 of them and replace them with the best AEs in the world, would they do it? And they said yes. I said, then go fire them and hire 6 more SDRs. That's where the efficiency comes in. When you have more people who you're paying, in California it's around a $45,000, $50,000 base to do a ton of prospecting versus more AEs. So the problem is that you're lopsided, in my opinion, and organizations are still built that way. So I hope that answers that questions for you.
Yeah, and you actually made a really good point there of talking about typically not a lot of AEs are very good at prospecting. And in fact, it's not even in their makeup. They're actually more aligned with an account management role than they are an account executive role. They're farmers or nurturers by nature versus somebody that is a salesperson, a successful salesperson, typically a lot more direct, and just not the right personality for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, if you want to elaborate, maybe.
Yeah. So there's one thing. So for me, an AE needs to actually be a hunter, not a farmer. If you have an AE that's a farmer, my guess is they're probably going to be better geared towards customer success because they're going to not want to close as hard.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. That's the one thing I love about customer success. There's now a great part of the sales funnel where those reps that we really like and wish could close better but can't can come back and add so much more value to the customer journey and even to the organization because they are such strong nurturers. So that's something I've been pushing a lot lately.
Yeah. Great.
So quick question. What if the culture of the sales team is real heavy on AEs and the C-suite's not willing to embrace ramping up some new SDRs? How do you...
It's an Excel discussion. It's not a Word discussion.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris. But I answer this all the time. It's like I said, you got 15 AEs. Here's what they cost. Here's what an SDR costs. What percentage of the AEs are actually more than carrying their number, right? They're carrying their own cost. If they're not, get rid of them, right? Then you're going to make the other AEs very happy and very fat with a lot of good commissions. And
I would love to continue this further offline about a use case that we might be able to demonstrate so that other sales managers have some collateral that they can take to the C-suite and say, hey, here's an opportunity. We shouldn't let it go by. And here's some real results. So maybe we can talk about that later on next week.
Sure. Be happy to.
Yeah, there's tons of content out there, too, that's just from awesome companies like Data and Eyes or Sales Loft that they just put stuff out on a daily basis around why you should go do this. Why, it is dubbed the year of the SDR for a reason from a lot of people for that. And they're all talking about it very openly. So there's lots of content out there.
Yeah. So, although SDRs could answer though. Okay, cool. So I did bring up a couple of things just since do we have any other questions? Because I've got a couple of things I could comment on from some previous questions that I think people would like to hear about. So, all right. So people were asking what to look for in SDRs and these college graduates. And I have a couple of questions that I ask people to help see if they have the right piece, right? So, I will add, one of the things that we're always looking for, particularly in a startup world, is they've got to be hardworking, can do, roll up their sleeves, right? All these horrible euphemisms. And so I will ask someone to tell me the longest project they've ever worked on. If they're a college graduate, they've had to write a long paper, they've had to write something, they've had to do something in their life. And I keep it very generic. I don't make them say, "Oh, in college, tell me your longest project." I actually asked someone that question once, and she was sitting in front of me, and she told me that she lost 100 pounds. And I said, "That's amazing. That's a really long project. That's hardworking, can-do attitude, roll up your sleeves." I mean, you can't teach somebody those things, right? So I look for it in life experience is maybe the best way when people don't have work experience yet. Another one I look for, I call it their warrior. You heard me say it earlier, their warrior spirit, and sort of how do they react in that panic mode, and just how do they really just rise above it. And again, I ask them to tell me a time when you had 5 things you do that all had to be done right then, because we've all had that moment in life, no matter what it is. And how did you get through it, right? Let's see. This is a good one too. Is this comes with objection handling, right? So, and I'm trying to measure their improv skills, right? Think on their feet. And I'll ask them, and don't tell your HR people I told you to ask this question, but I just say, how have you ever had to handle a crisis? Right? A crisis occurs. You're going to buy your ring and you got a ticket, or I'm surprised the cop didn't let you out of that one though. But how they've handled crisis tells you how they're going to handle objections, because objections are a crisis moment. That's what it is, right? Another one is, and I'll sort of stop after this to see if people have questions, but I'm always looking for somebody who's naturally curious, right? Because that's a makeup of a salesperson. That means they're not going to be afraid to ask questions. And so when I ask them if they're naturally curious, I'll ask them if they ever buy something, do you read the instructions or do you put something together, right? And that answer always tells me something about them. I'm not really looking for one answer over the other. I'm just looking at how they answer that question, because it will tell me how they handle things and how they try and figure stuff out and how they think.
Yeah. Richard, I'd like to echo that and ask both of you if you are familiar. I know you are familiar with Mark Robert's The Sales Acceleration Formula. First 4 chapters, the sales hiring formula. He calls out 2 key elements, curiosity and coachability, as things to look for. Both of you guys, I'd like to get some feedback on how you coach SDRs, because I think this concept of ramping is really key. And coaching is starting to bubble up as a real lever to help leverage, especially somebody who may have potential but doesn't shine right out of the gate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So go ahead, Phil. I've been doing a lot of talking.
Oh, you're good. One thing I would say, so asking for it in the interview, I asked the question of what's the last book you read? So find out, do they actually read, or are they invested in self-learning? Because that's a huge part of being coachable. And after that, then you go into the actual training sessions. I teach them more about what's the ideal customer profile for us. What's the actual process to make the purchase for us? What's problems they currently experience you need to run into? Because if you allow them to understand how to build value with that customer, they're not going to really ever have to handle objections. And then you teach them how to handle objections down the road and teach them how to sell. But you teach them fundamentals about your customer, things they need to know, so then they know how to go prospect. They know how to have conversations about building value, about what your product does, your solution does. And then you get into sales skills around how to ask the right questions. So asking questions that make people think, not questions that are yes or no answers, because you're not going to get anywhere on the phone with that. In SDR, you need to ask them things that make them realize they have a problem, and especially in a cold call. Because when you call somebody, they're not going to know if what they're doing is broken or not. They just assume it is. So, or they assume that it's not broken because they've done it that way for 30 years and it's the way it is. So,
yeah. So with Phil's answer, Chris, do you want to sort of reframe the question a little bit, or because I don't know that I would add anything to it, or we can move on. So.
No, I think, Phil, you did a really good job. And I'm just curious, Hampus is curious into jumping into the open seat. I know we're about at the end of our time. Do you guys want to chat with him briefly, or should we schedule that for next time?
I'm open to, look, I'm here to help you guys. So, and I can stay a few extra minutes too. So it's entirely up to you.
Okay, so he has expressed desire. Hampus, I know you can hear me. You should be able to join the conversation, and I'll accept you or join. And this is a great opportunity for our teammates to talk live to each other.
Sure.
He's coming on board.
Hey, Hampus.
Hey.
go on.
All right.
Great talk. This is super interesting.
So I want to give you and Richard and Phil a chance to have a three-way conversation with the next 5 minutes that we've got left here.
Okay.
Right. I think that we, I don't know how many, we see a lot of companies that we work with that are building SaaS companies, and right now are either doing it one or two ways. Either they're building a company that are heavily outbound prospecting and cold calling, or they're really trying to build it like inbound, very sort of HubSpot-ish. And we kind of start out by having our time zone problem that I introduced talking about. We started out trying to figure out how to get customers to come to us. So we've really built a strategy around that. But I think that, as I wrote on the chat, I think that we've been able to sign these tremendous customers, and we have incredible companies coming in, but it feels very, very random. It doesn't, the whole repeatability of the sales process, it's like one day we sign a huge deal, and the next day it can be silent for a month. And I think that, I wonder, because you read about the HubSpots of the world and everybody preaching content marketing, and it feels like everything you're saying right now is kind of the much more salesy direction and much less marketing direction. Like if many of the HubSpots guys were here, they would preach the other direction, I guess. Could you, what are your thoughts about that? Inbound versus outbound.
So I think it's a balance. I actually have this challenge in my own business too, is how do I write some good stuff on a regular basis so that my stuff is just out there so people can find me. But then I also just need to spend, a couple hours, every day on the phone calling, right? And doing things. So, and I think what you're experiencing is very normal. I don't think you're, I think that there are lots of people who've had this challenge of, what you're really talking about is limited resources. Because to me, the best answer is both. You should have someone doing content marketing, and you should have a sales team, doing some outbound research. Now, in a smaller group, you might have to get really, really controlled on how you do that. It may be that you need one blog post every 2 weeks, but it needs to be really good, right? Mm-hmm. You may need to have, a look at how you're handling sales and managing that. You may need to do some social selling, like I talked about earlier today, where I'm just, I'm on different websites and I just comment to add value. And it takes 6 months, right? That's just part of it. But make sure that you identify, I think, and someone can correct me, make sure you identify 4 or 5 things that are valuable to help move that needle, right? Whether it's a white paper or a blog post, and set a cadence to it. If you're going to do calling, make sure that you set a time every week to do that calling, or certain days, or any of those kinds of things, right? And then stick to your schedule. The discipline is probably the hardest part. Creating the pattern isn't as hard as much as it is the discipline to stick to it. So, and I'll let someone else answer that question.
To piggyback on that, I think that's one thing. The hardest thing to teach your SDRs is how to organize their day and their life, because you can do both. You can do inbounds and outbounds, and they should be treated. If someone puts a demo request in and they're raising their hand to say, I need to see your solution, call them back right away. Like, that has to happen. It has to happen within 5 minutes. Get them on the phone, see what happens, and sell to them right away. There's different sense of urgency. If you're selling to somebody like a Hootsuite or a larger enterprise organization, there's other things that have to happen besides a white paper. There's events that you have, field marketing events you need to go to. There's dinners you're going to have to set out. There's going to be a whole process into getting them from just a cold approach to a warm approach, to then getting them to say, all right, I'm raising my hand, I'll do a demo request with you, and then getting them to that account executive to then go work that deal. And then there's different support you need on an executive level once they become an opportunity. There's no right or wrong way. I think that everybody wants to tell you that their way is the right way to do it. Social selling is not the right way for everybody. Outbound cold calling is not the right way for everybody. Email is not the right thing for everybody. You got to find what's right for your organization, your company, and if you can't do that, you got to go back and look at your ideal customer profile and figure out how to reach them. So
I think that the hard part is, I think for me, is I think we've by mistake figured out maybe what people find usually the hard part. We currently have around 130 new companies every month installing our product and starting to using it, and a large portion of those asking for demos. So I think that seems to be working. But I think what I find is really the process from us from going to people saying, I like your product, to actually close won deals, is where I feel we're not sort of handling it. Like, the conversion rates we have in the funnel are not good enough. And I think that, I guess it's just the pure sales discipline or the sales methodology or showing them return on investment. And I think what you said previously, Richard, was great about just like what ROI really means. Like, we had like at least 6 months when we were panicking about ROI means it has to have a dollar sign at the end of it. But it was great just realizing we could just tell them that, like, Evernote inputted 200% more data. And people were like, okay, that's the great ROI. It's like, what? Are you fine with that? So, but I think that for us, I think the hard part is now like building actually the sales process.
Well, that may be something, Hampus, we can chat about offline. I mean, I'm happy to chat here, but I'd be curious to know if you've got that many people seeing demos and that many people installing the software. It feels like somewhere at your organization, people are afraid to ask for the close, or they're waiting for someone, or they're waiting for someone to go, okay, great, we're ready to pay for it now. Which, that's what happens in the grocery store, right? You go buy what you want. So that might be part of the challenge you're experiencing.
Everybody who's paid for our product has bought the product.
Right. Exactly.
We haven't sold it to anybody.
So and this is for everybody. It's a great question to ask. When someone says, hey, can we get a demo? Or, hey, can we install the product? And you can say, absolutely, we want you to, but I've got a quick question for you. Now, I'm going to show you a demo that's going to work. You're going to install the product, it's going to work, minus a bug, right? But what happens after you see that demo? What happens after that? Are we ready to have a conversation about commercial terms? So that way we don't say, are you ready to buy? You remove some of that angst about talking about money. Yeah. But before you do it, say, absolutely. But the next step after that is to talk about commercial terms. So you might as well tell them you're going to ask them after they've had a chance to kick the tires.
Yeah.
And then when it's time, then they go, oh, well, we're not going to have budget for 6 months. Well, then it's, Hampus, it's up to you or anybody else who's listening to kind of go, well, do we really want this person to demo our product free for 6 months?
Yeah.
Early stage startups, you kind of do, right? I get it. But at least right? And that's the problem.
Yeah.
People are afraid to ask, but then they don't know, and then they get upset that they don't know. So,
piggyback on that too. So as an SDR, when you first get that outreach, I think what you have to go out and find out. So we ask 2 questions that fit in our SDR process. So what resonated with you about this solution? And then what compelling events actually led you to actually seek out a solution for this problem? Because I think you start realizing, hey, what pain is driving this initiative? Who in this organization is starting to push this down to do this? And then you either go get in contact with that person, you talk at a bigger level, or you go talk to that person, you keep pushing on that pain like a doctor would and say, great, does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? Does this hurt? And eventually you find out their problem and you'll get them to buy quicker or get them to that end game quicker.
Right.
So,
that is really actually the thing that we. Sorry.
Add just 2 things to those great comments, guys. One is ask, how do you define success? What is measurable to show that this product is working for you? And 2, who's the internal brand champion? I think it's really important to support them as they move up and down throughout the organization, to give them additional resources to help show how it's improving the workflow inside your prospect's company.
Good point, yeah.
Yep.
I think what made a huge difference for us was actually what we said previously, Phil, that we just asked people, like, why did you download the product? Why did you install it? What was the pain you tried to solve? Mm-hmm. And from that answer, then, 30% of them, they're not a match. And then you can just tell them that, like that's not what we do, but then the other 70%, then we actually can, focus on that pain and give them case studies on how that pain was helped at other places. So that's a really good point. Maybe we should put more of a methodology around that.
Yeah.
Yep. Great.
Cool. I think we're about out of time, correct, Chris?
Yeah, we're wrapping up. I wanted to give both of you guys a chance, and Hampus, please hang in here with us to discuss what is up and coming for you in the next month or so, both individually and with your company, so we can continue to learn more.
Phil, you want to go first?
Sure. I will be doing, I mentioned it briefly if anybody was on before the chat started, Liz Kane from NetSuite. I will be joining a sales hacker chat with her and Max on next Tuesday at 10 o'clock Eastern. That will be great. And then we have a webinar coming up towards the end of the month with SalesLoft. I'll give you guys more details in the SalesStack group. And then we'll be at Dreamforce as well. So come out and see us at Dreamforce and see what our product does. So,
yeah, we're let's see, what do I have going on? I'm actually going up to see some clients in Vancouver next week, so that's going to be fun. I haven't been up there in a long time. And then I've got a couple of SalesStack things going on. We've got one coming up in Seattle that I think is going to be a lot of fun. And for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a 4 to 5 hour workshop with myself and Sean Daly and some other folks from Sales Hacker, and we are literally helping you figure out how to build this outbound engine. Very specifically, we'll talk about things like hiring and interviewing. We'll talk about what tools you need in your sales stack. We'll talk about actually some sales skills. How do you go below that surface pain that Hampus was talking about and getting into real pain? And so that's sort of a little thing that's happening around the country right now. We just had one in New York. We've got another one coming up in Boston. We've got one in Seattle. We're actually going to be doing one at Dreamforce as well. Then in November, we've got the big, our SalesStack, from Sales Hacker, conference coming up that's going to be in San Francisco. I think it's 2 days, might be 1 day, but that's going to be a big one too, where we're going to have a ton of speakers and that sort of thing. So that'll be a lot of fun. And then other than that, I'm just, working with clients and helping them solve their problems and, helping them increase their ROI.
Hampus, how about you? What are you looking forward to in terms of events in the next month or so?
Yeah, I think that the coming 2 months, Dreamforce is probably the one. But otherwise, most of my time is going to be here locally, operationally improving product team and structure of things. That's kind of all we do. But Dreamforce is one of those events we always go to. Actually, 60% of our time is meeting customers. We spend very little time actually going to Dreamforce. But it's a great week.
That's great.
Fantastic. I'm going to throw out 2 events that we're looking forward to in the Pacific Northwest. One is Accelerate Sales, hosted by Pipeline Drive or Pipeline Deals. It's kind of an account-based marketing meets sales acceleration with Craig Rosenberg and Matt Hines and Lincoln Murphy and some other really great speakers. That's August 19th, 20th. And then the 21st with Richard Harris, Jason Vargas, and Muktan Mehta, I believe, from Microsoft Ventures. So it's a jam-packed 3 days, and we'll be reporting back in the SalesStack Slack team. A lot going on right now in terms of sales acceleration and account-based sales as well. We are at time. I just wanted to say hi to Ben Christoph. He's a team member. Yes, we did videotape this meeting, so you'll be able to catch it on our SalesStack channel. That is YouTube SalesStack, 2 S's, all one word. Thanks, Nick LaFond, for being our producer for editing this video. It looks like Richard Harris has left his contact info.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Richard. Phil, would you also put your contact, and Hampus, please put your contact information as well, so that folks who are interested in learning more can find you very easily online.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah.
It looks like Ben is asking for information on the live events that we just talked about, and we'll definitely put that in the Edu Live Events channel. Ben, you'll be able to find that there. I want to thank everybody here for really sharing a lot of important information, and it's our job to kind of take it and send it out to other folks in the team. So we look forward to continuing the conversation. Richard, I really appreciate you for allowing to keep the Ask Richard Harris channel going.
Yeah, please. Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you for asking me to do this. I really, until about 2 or 3 weeks ago, had just sort of heard about SalesStack and wasn't really sure about how it was all going, and I'm really excited about it. So thank you for inviting me in. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you. We are growing organically and adding about 5 new team members every business day. So we are looking at how to make the team more efficient, more effective. And Phil Keene, thank you for being a lead to help grow this conversation. And Hampus, you've been great as well. You guys are really helping to lead the way in terms of developing a sales knowledge pipeline. I can't thank you enough.
Yep.
Thank you. It's been amazing.
All right. So I'm going to wrap here unless there's any last comments that you would like to share.
Good.
I'm all good.
Appreciate it, Chris.
Yeah.
All right, you guys.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.